Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're about the middle of the semester now, and you've had several short essay assignments, and now we are going to be making the second discussion forum live for you here in just a little bit, and so that you can complete that discussion forum before you go into spring break. Now, but for our final lecture, before we begin, before we dive into, before you go into spring break, what I want to do is we want to talk a little bit about the concept of jihad, because it is a concept that weaves its way throughout Islam, and it's highly misunderstood by those who are outside of that group, who maybe hear the term in the news or hear it in popular culture and wind up having a perception about it as having some sort of negative connotation. And in reality, Christianity has the same problem, because oftentimes we even went through our history about the Crusades, and in many cases, Christianity today in popular culture still uses the term crusades, or even sometimes the school mascot for Christian schools are crusaders, without ever stopping to think, well, wait a second, is that the perception we want to give? And or maybe how do we interact with people about these historic terms that are weave their way throughout our sacred literature, but actually have a lot of nuance to them. So we don't want to have misunderstanding about these things. We want to understand them better. So for someone like myself, I hear a term jihad, and I know it's part of has to do with something regarding the struggle within the religious tradition, Islamic religious tradition. But I want to be informed about that so I can have good dialogue about that. And so what we want to do is Dr. Hawk can walk us through that today. Dr. Hawk?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Ott, and dear students. As you look in the syllabus, we have a discussion on the concept of the jihad and the current issues. So today I'll give you a little presentation in which we will go into the details of what is the concept and the overall concept of jihad, or the institution of jihad in Islam, and what are the misunderstandings, and what is the relationship between fighting and war rules and jihad. And then we will go into a little bit details of the fighting rules, and then we will talk about some of the misunderstandings. So let me share my screen with you, and I will share a few slides with you. But it looks like I'm not host.
My apologies. There you go.
Okay, got it. Okay. You can see it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Jihad is an important institution in Islam. It has a spirit which has to do with a overall Islamic lifestyle, and it's not necessarily related with fighting or war. So we will just go over some introductory slides about the jihad and what actually it is. So first of all, jihad is one of the institutions in Islam. And the purpose of this institution is to make the life of a Muslim or a believer successful, not only in this world, but in the day hereafter. So, and basically the concept of jihad is to keep believers ready and active by divine commandments, so that they could exert their best possible efforts, and they use their resources in the best way, utilizing their rational, linguistic, and physical faculties to support and fight for their defense against any kind of aggression or attack, and for truth and what is right against what is false and evil. So basically, it's a struggle and a fight against all evils, against all injustices, against all which is against the human values, human rights. And this is in order to make everybody on its toe so that they stay active, up to their task, they are punctual, they are not inactive. Interestingly, Dr. Ott, the opposite of the jihad in the Quran is sitting down idly or lazily. So that gives us also the meaning of the jihad is means to stay active. And I know that as we all know, that the fighting was allowed in the Quran only after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and all the Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina. And in the Medina, the wars started, where it was allowed that now you can go fight. But in the Meccan periods, Muslims were not allowed to fight back. They were only given the commandments to be patient, to be tolerant, and never attack back or respond back the same way. But the ayat or the verses of jihad were revealed in Mecca, which means that they were not related with the fighting. They were related with an inner struggle. So let me show you the linguistic aspect of the word jihad, which will make it more clear. So linguistically, the Arabic word jihad is derived from the root word jahada, which means to exert effort and hard work. Technically, to exert maximum efforts in defending oneself against the enemy by any means possible, tongue, pen, money, hands, physically, or whatever. So what is jihad? Jihad is a worship with respect to its intention and objectives. But with respect to its rules and regulations, it falls in the category of dealings. Jihad in its true nature is an utmost effort to support the truth and fight against the evil under divine commandments. This is struggling to help the oppressed and to give respect to the downtrodden humans. Well, that is the overall concept of the jihad, which is basically struggle. Now, there are types of jihad. If you read the Quran, you will find several kinds. One is the jihads one's against own self. And that is about controlling one's own mind and body from evil thoughts and action. So that is a self-discipline. And the person who is struggling against his own evil desires and controlling himself or herself, that is considered the topmost kind of the jihad. And then jihad by spreading knowledge, because the Quran says that make your jihad with the Quran, which means teaching, guiding, and encouraging others to do the right thing. Jihad of knowledge has more value than both jihads against one's own self or the monetary jihad. Now, the monetary jihad is when the Quran commands multiple times for monetary jihad, which means if there is a financial need, if there is a situation in which you can help by donating, by charity, by contributing what resources you have on your hand, like taking care of the poor people, hungry, homeless, the people that they are like have been kicked out of their homes because of the wars and because of the other situations all over the world. So that is called monetary jihad. Now, with respect to the general jihad, besides both these kinds of jihad mentioned above, there are several other ways in Islam to make jihad. Any effort for a good cause is jihad. Once the Prophet told a woman, your jihad is Hajj, going for pilgrimage, because that is a huge effort. And when some young people came and they said, we want to do jihad, and the Prophet Muhammad said, do you have your parents? They said, yes. So go take care of them, that is your jihad. So being straightforward and saying what is truth and right in the most difficult situations is also jihad. This is one of the definitions given by Prophet Muhammad himself, that the best jihad is when you stand up for the truth, when it is difficult to stand up. That is the best jihad that he said. So these are the different types of the jihad that are there. And we can post these slides for you so that you can see it on your blackboard also after we finish.
Interestingly, there in Christianity, there are parallels to all of those in the New Testament. And
Okay.
it's interesting that the term jihad, perceptions wind up getting shaped by popular media and news outlets and so forth. And it's unfortunate that this term winds up, sometimes getting, a lot of misperceptions associated with it, because in reality, I could march through the New Testament and find parallel passages that either prescribe or describe all of those. So, I mean, in the, for example, the top one, the jihad against one's own self. In the Christian calendar, this is the period of what's described as Lent, which began last Wednesday with Ash Wednesday. And that Lent is basically a 40, give or take.
Is it in the Catholics only or Protestants also?
In all the Catholic traditions, whether they be Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Anglican. The Protestants don't do this quite so much.
Okay.
But in many of the Christian traditions that are Catholic or liturgical, they engage in Lent, and Lent is a penitential season in which people will.
It's kind of a fasting.
Very much. A lot of fasting.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it happened. It's occurred very close to the Ramadan.
That's right.
Which is starting in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Absolutely. And so it's not any coincidence that all these Judaism, Islam, and Christianity has these in spring. And so if similar calendar overlaps there, and as a result, there's a heightened desire to struggle against one's own flaws during that time. So, well,
in Islam, since the month of Ramadan is according to the lunar calendar, so it's keep on moving throughout the seasons.
So it's interesting that there isn't a corresponding word in Christianity that one uses to describe all these, but I take your descriptions and I can find passages throughout the New Testament to show that Christians could relate to this. And so instead of reacting to a term that they don't understand, they should actually see the commonalities that Muslims struggle in the following ways, and so do Christians, and just there's a tremendous parallel there in the practice. Sorry to interrupt, but I found that interesting.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for your input. Now, what is the relationship of fighting with jihad? There is a misunderstanding in this part, because jihad is always associated with fighting, which is not always true. Fighting in the battlefield for the defense of Islam, Muslims, justice, and for truthfulness, the actual battle or fight in the battlefield, the Quran uses the word qital, which means to fight actually. So in many places in the Quran, Allah says that whosoever fight in the cause of Allah. So this fight is the word used in Arabic is qital and not jihad. And that is what is the proper terminology for fighting in Islam. It's called qital. Normally, then there are rules of fighting for qital in Islam. So there are pre-war rules, during war rules, post-war rules, and the rights of the prisoners of the war. Now, since we are saying that the proper word for fighting, which is used in the Quran, is qital, so that's why we need to know some of the rules of qital, rules of fighting. So I separated all these rules that are scattered in many places in the Quran and in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, but I put them together like pre-war and during war and post-war rules so that we understand it easily, that how it goes in an order. So first of all, the pre-war rules. Religious differences cannot be the cause and basis of any war, which means in the Quran, it is clear more than one time that you cannot fight with people just because they belong to a different religion. The valid cause of initiating war is only aggression or political threat or potential threat. Otherwise, fighting is not allowed. And in all the fighting verses in the Quran, it says, fight against those who fight against you. So the reason for fighting is aggression and not the difference of religion. The Quran is very clear about dealing with the people of other faiths if they are not aggressive. So there are Quranic, basically, Dr. Ott, what happens is that Quran was revealed in a period of 23 years. It was not revealed all of it together. And it was revealed according to the ups and downs in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. So when Prophet Muhammad, for example, is traveling or migrating, the relevant verses of migration revealed. When there was a war going on, then the wartime verses were revealed. When there was a peace agreement with the Meccans, then the peace verses were revealed. Now, generally, what happens is that the media and the other, they like to quote only wartime verses. And then these are naturally generalized. But the peacetime verses are not even touched and not quoted. Okay. So that is what war. So for example, there is a verse in the Quran which says that those people of other religions, that they have not declared a war against you and they do not have any animosity. You should treat them nicely and kindly and with justice. Now, this verse is not mentioned quite often. So, and then the next rule is that war cannot be declared except by a legitimate authority of Muslims. For example, it should come from a Muslim state, not a group. And then from the Muslim state also, only authentic and authorities can declare the war or their representative. Any group or any individual within an Islamic state is not authorized to start a war, which is happening now a lot of places. Then no illegal or illegitimate sources can be used to spy on enemy or get secret information about the forces of enemies, like using intoxicants or women and all those things. Normally, the secret agencies, they do not have any limits how they are going to get the information, but there are certain rules that Prophet told that even in any situation, those rules cannot be violated. So these were, I declare it, pre-war rules. Now let's go to when the war actually starts. For example, there is an aggression or there is an attack from another army, then the Muslims have to fight back. In that situation, the rules, what are the rules? During war rules, number one, non-combatants are not legitimate targets, as the permission is only to fight back against those who attack. Attacking non-combatants will be considered transgression. Transgression is a word in the Quran which is repeatedly used, which means in the Arabic is mu'tadeen, which means crossing all the limits. Weapons of mass destruction and biological or chemical weapons that can destroy generations of human beings or life on earth are not allowed. And the verses in chapter 2 in the Surah Al-Baqarah, in which the Quran says that anything that can be harmful in future for the human generations or for the crops or plants or anything like that. Those things are not allowed. Besides this, treachery, mutilation of the dead, killing children, and those busy in worship places like churches, synagogues, or temples are not to be killed or harmed. No killing of women in war. No demolition of buildings. No cutting trees. And no burning crops and no killing of cattle. These instructions have been quoted in the books of the Hadith, which means the books of the sayings of the Prophet. Since the time of the Prophet, these are there. If the enemy wants to give up war and wants peace, you must take peace with them. And amazingly, there are 2 or 3 verses that I found in the Quran which says that if enemy all of a sudden in the middle of the war shows that, okay, we don't want to fight, we want to negotiate a peace, then Muslims are by divine commandments bound to accept that offer of peace. They cannot say, no, we are winning, we don't need peace. And so much so that chapter 10 says that even if it is a trick by the enemy, still you have to consider this peace offer which is being made. So these are the rules during the war. Now, as far as post-war rules are concerned, peace agreements must be honored. If there is an agreement, because of that the war ended, then it is a divine responsibility of the Muslims to follow that, to honor that peace agreement. Okay, and rights of the prisoners of war. Prisoners of war have rights like any other human being. They need to be fed properly. Taking care of the food of prisoners has been declared worship in the following verse. I did not quote the verse. Prisoners of war cannot be forced to accept Islam. They can only be invited to accept Islam. They can be explained, but you cannot put pressure on the prisoners of war that, okay, if you accept Islam, we will release you. Because accepting the faith is a very spiritual thing, is not something that you can twist somebody's arm to make him believe something. If the whole family become prisoners, they are not to be separated. Prophet Muhammad was very much concerned after the Battle of the Badr when there were about 70 prisoners. And he issued instructions that if there are mother, children, or if there are father and son or brothers, then they should not be separated. Taking care of the people in the conquered land and treating them fairly. After the victory, Muslims are commanded to be fair and just to the people of the conquered land. History is witness that no other conquerors or rulers could deal with the people of the conquered lands as Muslims did. Christians were given option to live in the territory of Islam through making of treaties with the Muslims authorities. Many chose to do so rather than to migrate to Christian land. This was because of the religious teachings of Islam to Muslims. What was happening, Dr. Ott, was that at the time of the expansion we are talking about, Christians were, many of them have mutual wars and differences. And for example, Eastern Christians were not very happy with the Romans or Byzantine creed or other differences. So Muslims were giving them this freedom. Okay, we don't care what kind of faith you have, what denomination. So that was the reason that some of them preferred that they felt it the kind of more religious freedom. This was a practice that was actually most of the time these rules were applied in the history, but I know that every Muslim ruler in the history was not really abiding by all the rules of Islam. There were people that they did for their own political or other reasons, violations against the rules of Islam. Many rulers used to drink. They used to have a lot of women, which actually nobody was allowed to have more than 4. But there were a clear-cut violations. Similarly, in treating non-Muslims and prisoners of war, we find here and there in the history violations too, but that does not mean that those violations were authorized by the religion of Islam. Okay.
Well, I had a question about these because you're about to you're going to discuss misunderstandings of it, and probably one of the, you may have this in your presentation further, and I want to defer to that if that's so, but there's an uncomfortable or kind of almost a silly question that may hang in the air for some people, that following the events of September 11th, 2001, the term jihad was thrown all over the news, and it became part of the popular lexicon with all the misunderstandings attached, because many sought to ascribe the perpetrators of 9/11, ascribe to them some sort of distinctly Muslim motive, and that's a misunderstanding that was floating about in popular culture. And it seems to me that's almost like it seems a silly question now, but I think we still benefit from having a very reasoned explanation from.
Well, I am mentioning something here in the misunderstandings, that the, let me go over it and then we will get to that in the bottom. Orientalists, Western media, and some Muslims have misunderstood and are misinterpreting jihad as war and are mistranslating it as holy war. Okay. Now, it's not only the biased media or some of the Orientalists, but I understand that some groups of Muslims are also involved in spreading this misunderstanding about the jihad. The term for war in Islamic resources is qital or harb. And the word for the holy war is al-harb al-muqaddas. And it's not jihad. Holy war basically is a Christian term, which was coined in pre-Islamic Christian times. Right. Britannica says that it is a biblical term, which actually, personally, I don't agree that the holy war is a biblical term. I'm not sure. Dr. Ott probably can throw some light on it.
Yes, there's ways in which terms for conflict are used in Hebrew throughout the Old Testament. It's mainly, the idea comes from, in fact, when you're done here, I'll point out to students a handout that's on the content page that's titled Combative Sounding Biblical Terms, or biblical Bible verses, in which, in like manner, that some who are not Muslim will cherry pick passages from the Qur'an to make them, use them out of their context and make them sound rather sinister. I point out that one can do the exact same thing to the Bible, taking passages and phrases out of their context and all of a sudden just quote it by itself like a bumper sticker on a car to sound quite combative. And the term holy war is one of those that comes from the period of, in the books of Joshua and Judges, when the ancient Israelites that came out of Egypt were commanded to conquer the land of Canaan, which would be what we call the Levant in modern day, on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean. And they're commanded to conquer that land and to drive out the people before them. And this is like this is the news moment where the woman, the guy who's the diplomat, and the woman jumps in to grab the children and pull them out of the picture. I'm recording a lecture right now. It's going to go on YouTube. Everybody's watching you. So just let you know. So please say hi to my colleague, Dr. Hawk.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm sorry for that.
That's fine.
My wife is now in our lecture today that's going to be uploaded My goodness.
Okay.
So anyway,
Okay.
guys, just
So,
so anyway, so my apologies. The those combative sounding Bible verses can be used out of context and used specifically coming from that period in which the ancient Israelites are commanded to take over the land of the Canaanite land, which if later on was considered to be a land according to the Hebrew Bible telling, was promised to Abraham and his descendants. So phrases like that are come from those passages and wind up, and that's where the term holy war might be derived from. But ultimately, it's not a consistent theme throughout the Bible.
right.
Sorry to interrupt, and also for our fun episode we had.
That's fine. This is not only because the Western media is biased, but because some extremist Muslims are also misinterpreting the jihad and indirectly supporting the distortion of the concept of jihad in Islam. And this happened basically after 9/11, or maybe because of the Western attacks on some Muslim countries, or because of the Palestinian and Israeli issues. In the Muslim world, there are several groups that are politically frustrated because of different reasons. For example, some of the Palestinians who are living, like this is a second generation, they are living in the camps and they don't have a life. They are going through those obstacles and checkpoints every day, several times. So that results into frustration, and they want to fight back against what they are living, but they will use the word Islam or jihad for that. So people will misunderstand. And similarly, like making civilian targets, like what happened in 9/11 and others, that is absolutely against the basic rules of the jihad. You cannot target the civilians no matter what happens.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that unfortunately is a little Muslim contribution is there in spreading the misunderstanding about jihad also.
I see.
Unfortunately, there is a third factor. Besides anti-Islamic propaganda and extremist Muslims, the third factor which is helping spreading the misunderstanding, because the jihad has developed a commercial value. A book will have a better sale if it carries the word jihad somewhere on the title.
Interesting.
So news ratings will go up if the word jihad is mentioned, which is making more people, which is making the media to bring up more the word jihad because of its commercial value. And as we all know, that basically news is a business.
Yep.
You have to sell the news. Right. The more sensational news you create, the more money you get paid. And the more value, the more expensive is the advertisement which is run in between the news. Because news is watched by mostly educated, well-off people. Poor people, educationally backward or low educated people, they are not that much interested about the news. So news is automatically becomes a very rich area for the sake of advertisement. And unfortunately, anything that makes more people like alert or scared or everything, it's not only news. It goes through with the magazines, articles, newspaper, even websites. If you run a website against Islam, you can make a lot of money. So this is another factor which is contributed in misunderstanding the jihad and other Islamic terms. And basically, one of the reasons for the spread of the Islamophobia is also this commercial value. So much so that Islamophobia has become like an industry. And about 10 years ago, a book came in the name of the Islamophobia industry. by Nathan Lean. And I went through this book, and he says that it's not a few 100,000, or it's millions of dollars of business, which is making this, because utilizing, or I would say misusing or exploiting the fear among the people and their. So anyway, this is pretty much is what overall the meanings and rules of fighting and the actual meanings of the jihad, and a little bit related misunderstandings.
Okay.
So I hope this will help the students to get some ideas about the concept of jihad in Islam.
Okay.
And that's all. And we can post it for the students.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
So right. So wonderful. And if you when you create your PowerPoint, you can simply create a PDF out of that, and I'll upload. I'd be happy to upload it to the.
Yes, I will send you the PDF.
The content page. If you'll stop sharing, I will share for just a moment.
Okay.
And because I will show the students on the content page, I'm
making you host again.
Okay, thank you. On the content page, I have a file called Combative Sounding Bible Verses. And an example is, we were talking about how someone could take a passage or a line or a verse from the Bible, yank it out of its context, and make it sound like, and make it sound very ominous and very scary, depending on if they wanted to cast either, those who are Jewish, those who are Jewish, or those who are Christian, if they wanted to cast them in a bad light. So,
right.
So for example, from Hebrew Bible, verses from Deuteronomy, when the ancient Israelite people are commanded to go and to subdue and to conquer the Canaanite lands, which is the modern, what we would consider the Levant, regionally considered the Levant now. Phrases like from Deuteronomy 7:2, you must utterly annihilate them, make no treaty with them, and show them no mercy. And I mean, this has to do with every living creature. This is not just combative between armies. This is not just between combatants. This has to do with the command to destroy every living creature going through the Canaanite area. Worse than what we see from even the Quran. For Deuteronomy 13:15, you must by all means slaughter the inhabitants of that city with the sword. A command of the ancient Israelites.
So the one on the top is about what? I missed that.
The one on top, Deuteronomy 7:2, is a command by Moses given to the ancient Israelites that when they go into the new land that there was promised to them as descendants of Abraham, that they are to annihilate the current inhabitants of the land, conquer the cities, drive those people out, and to show them no mercy. So annihilate them where they find them or drive them out. And if they come across Deuteronomy 13:15, this is in a context. They're describing if you come across a city and the city resists you, by all means you must slaughter the inhabitants of the city with a sword. So this is a very specific historical context to it. But if someone yanked it out, they might say, "Hey, Christians believe this." And so
you are saying that it's not a general commandment; it was for a certain situation.
Exactly right.
Okay.
And so, I mean, but for example, in the book of Psalms, Psalm 18 has a lot of references to battle, dealing with. He trains my hands for battle. I chase my enemies and catch them. I do not turn back until I wipe them out. I beat them to death. They fall by my feet. You give me strength for battle. You make my foes kneel before me. They cry out, but there is no one to help them. They cry out to the Lord, but he does not answer them. I grind them as fine windblown dust. I beat them underfoot like clay in the streets. And this was from the book of Psalms, which is Hebrew poetry in the middle of the Bible. It's in the middle of the Bible. And many Christian churches to this day will sing songs taken from the book of Psalms in the middle of the Old Testament. Even in
Yeah,
the New
that's
Testament.
exactly what how the misinterpretation is done with respect to the Quran also.
Absolutely. So that's why I tell people, I say, be careful. I'll say this, even people say in the Christian tradition, and they'll say something about Islam because phrases in the Quran. I'll tell them, be careful. You don't like it when people do that to your sacred text. So you don't, in fact, Jesus gives us that admonition, however you want others to treat you, do so for them. You don't like it when other people misuse your sacred text, don't do it to them. But that's in the Old Testament. People will say, well, what about the New Testament? The New Testament, after Jesus has come, and in the Gospels, you have from Luke, Jesus says to his disciples, and the one who has no sword must sell his cloak and buy one, talking about how his disciples will experience different troubles as they go out into the world. The writer, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament says, you have not yet resisted to the point of bloodshed in your struggle against sin. Well, this has to do with persecution, but still taken by itself, someone could misuse that and make it sound like you're supposed to struggle with others to the point of bloodshed. And also in the book that's of Jude 1:3, contend earnestly for the faith. This idea of contend earnestly has to do with struggle and fighting for what you know to be true. But again, taken out of context, there's all sorts of ways people could interpret that. So I point that out for the students just so they understand that in like manner, that the phrases of the Quran get taken out of their context a lot and made to teach things that no Muslim typically says. The Bible could do the same. One could do the same thing with the Bible if their agenda was to make Christianity or Judaism sound scary.
Correct.
So that's I appreciate you. I appreciate your addressing the question about 9/11, because for many people outside of the Muslim arena, for many people who outside of the Islamic tradition, there's a great deal we have to admit our ignorance.
Right.
So for these things, especially like words like jihad that become part of the cultural lexicon, we hear it a lot but don't understand it, especially when it gets applied to an event. We benefit from hearing a Muslim scholar actually give us the explanation so we can think about it in a good way.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ott.
Thank you very
much. It was a great meeting.
Thank
We
you.
can stop the recording.
I'll stop recording at this time.